One of my favorite things that Fire Emblem Heroes does is it usually pays proper nods to its characters. Maybe not in the form of deserved stats and skills like in Avel, being a 5-star lock unit with no PRF, seriously that hurts so much to me, but I would say in terms of fleshing out its characters further in the world of Asker. It's always great to see one's favorite character get more spotlight. These days, the characterization for new heroes that enter the game can be pretty impressive, not only from quotes and references to weapons and whatnot, but also now with Forging Bonds dialogue and other PvE events. This series called What Were Fae Thinking sets out to take a gander at new heroes released in the game and to analyze their skills, quotes, and interactions in PvE modes to draw attention to the effort that Fae has made to connect their versions of these characters to the source material. I proposed the idea on Twitter, and I was surprised to see the amount of support and excitement for a series of this nature, so I hope I can do my best. And if you end up enjoying this video, please consider leaving a like and commenting down below your thoughts once everything's all said and done. I'm going to preface this by saying that these are all my opinion. I will do my best to use content from both Fae and the original title of Three Houses in this case to substantiate my observations. In the Forces of Will banner, Fae released Edelgard, Dimitri, the Morgan twins, and Orson as a GHB unit. This event is honestly really personally awesome for me. I'm not familiar with Morgan's presence in the DLC, but for fans of them, and they're happy for getting an alt, and it's a really cool one too, that's great. Orson is actually my favorite villain in the series, and Dimitri and Edelgard are both among my favorites in Three Houses. Yes, that is what I said. I greatly enjoy Edelgard, and my support science script on her could be a college thesis submission at this point. Originally, I was going to do a full banner analysis, but Fae is really good at repping their characters these days, so I'm actually only going to be comparing Fallen Edelgard to Edelgard in Three Houses, because wow, did they ever pay attention to detail here. Edelgard in this form is, of course, her endgame form in Azure-Moon. In-game, this was her final desperate attempt to secure victory over Dimitri and Byleth. Edelgard was always unflinching in the pursuit of her goals, but under this transformation, she is darker, more intense in her ideals, and notably colder to her enemies compared to her human self in Verdant Wind and Silver Snow.
They are here, but my progress cannot be stopped, no matter how many people try. The war's end will spell destruction for one of us. There can only be one ruler of the world.
In Fae, her castle quotes reflect this. My progress cannot be stopped. All who oppose me will fall to ruin. There can only be one true ruler. Her lack of hesitation to become the hegemon and her insistence that her pain is nothing is also drawn in this castle quote. This body is my wish, for change in a crooked world. Tremendous power is necessary.
This pain is nothing, compared to what I have already suffered.
But interestingly, many of her hegemon quotes are pulled directly from her parley with Dimitri in Azure-Moon. To put an end to a bloody history, someone must stand up, even if some call it self-righteous.
Pushing your own sense of justice and your own ideals onto even one other person is nothing more than self-righteousness.
Maybe it is self-righteousness, but it doesn't matter. Someone has to take action and put a stop to this world's endless, blood-stained history.
In this castle quote, it's as if she's literally continuing her argument with Dimitri about human strength. If you believe the weak will remain weak, look again when they are no longer forced to rely on others.
You cannot change the cycle of the strong dominating the weak with a method like that.
You're wrong. That very cycle is exactly what I have devoted my life and my power to destroying. If after all of this, you believe the weak will still be weak, that is only because they are too used to relying on others instead of on themselves. Even if one clings to their faith, the goddess will never answer them. Countless souls will be lost that way, living without purpose. And I can be counted among those who have died that way as well. But that's why I must change this world, on behalf of the silent and weak.
The goddess ignores the pleas of the faithful, and countless souls are lost. That is the crookedness of this world. Unsurprisingly, Her level up quotes call onto Hegemon Edelgard's desire for more power and how she will use it, especially her strong level ups. We must trample the past underfoot. We must move onward to a tomorrow that is brighter still.
These fools are caught up in the sacrifices at hand and cannot see the future ramifications at stake. We must bury them. We must trample the past underfoot and move onward to a brighter tomorrow.
The level 40 conversations are always really fascinating to read because they allow otherwise cold and unexplored characters to have an intimate conversation that at times can showcase their humanity. Edelgard wants to change the world as quickly as she can so that less people will suffer. Such sentiments were discussed in Azurmoon in the questions and answers cutscene.
It may be hard to believe, but this is the way that leads to the fewest casualties in the end. Don't you see?
In fact, a lot of Hegemon Edelgard's quotes are a darker variation of her philosophy as she explains it to Byleth and Dimitri. Hegemon Edelgard's language is notably more aggressive and colder than her human self. Fools imprisoned by their situation, with no vision for future possibilities. They are betrayers of progress. This is a sentiment that I believe that human Edelgard would understand, but I don't think she views those imprisoned by their situation, or the weak and the reliant on gods, as betrayers of progress. But human Edelgard does display a misunderstanding of devotion, but she owns up to it.
I once asked you why you chose to retire. You said that the goddess supports you emotionally, but it's up to you to take care of the rest. I have to admit that I don't quite understand what you meant by that. Can you please explain?
My divinely gifted voice only got me to the edge of the stage. From there, I had to work hard to defeat my rivals. I did all of this by myself through sheer force of will, all so I could stand center stage.
Ah, I see I was wrong about something. I thought that being a devout believer implied a certain weakness of spirit, an inability to survive on your own. But you've proven me wrong, Professor Manuela.
Side note, this is a really cool characterization from Edelgard. I really enjoy Faye's choice to flesh out Hegemon Edelgard in this way. In Azurmoon, we have a scant amount of lines for Hegemon Edelgard, and you can only infer so much on her battle quotes. So for heroes to take Hegemon's writing and go in a direction that explores the darker extremes of her sentiments on the weak and the strong in her discussion with Dimitri is really cool. And now we reach the quote section.
I will not suffer child's play. That piece of my heart is no more.
I'm afraid it will do no good to reminisce, Dimitri. That girl you knew back then is gone, as good as dead.
The above line comes just after Edelgard is given the dagger from Dimitri from their childhood once again. But here it's used in Faye as the usual Avatar is trying to play games with the summoned hero. In her 5-star quote, she says this:
Facing you, I grow weak.
The same line is said when Byleth confronts her in the final chapter.
Facing you, I grow weak.
In Three Houses, this line, in my opinion, was an appeal to the humanity that remains within Edelgard even though she has undergone this transformation. Her human heart is preserved even though her body becomes monstrous. That's the extent she will go to make her dreams come true, and it reflects just how indomitable of a will she actually has. Heroes even goes the extra mile in this by removing Edelgard's voice filter towards the end of this line to indicate that she retains her humanity. And if you don't believe me, her Japanese line is much clearer with this.
Facing you, I grow weak.
あなたを前にすると、私が鈍る。
Her relationship with Byleth in Azurmoon isn't terribly explored for obvious reasons. You don't fight with her. But as evidence in this route, and Verdant Wind, and Silver Snow, Edelgard holds Byleth in high regard and shares a unique kinship with her. Perhaps it has to do with their shared crest of flame. But in any case, it's a nice attention to detail for this line to be a 5-star quote. Let's talk about equipment. Edelgard's unique weapon, Twin Crest Power, and her personal skill, Armored Wall, combine to make Edelgard absolutely stacked with skills. In 3 houses, Twin Crests was an ability unique to her that allowed her to act twice per turn, and Twin Crest Power was her close-up weapon. The weapon wasn't anything particularly special, but she had many abilities that made her difficult to fight, which would make sense as she's an endgame boss. Command her made her more resistant to gambit damage and its effect, just like every other boss would have, but she had heavily armored wall, which reduced all damage dealt onto her by 50%. Slayer weapons couldn't work on her, and Vital Defense prevented critical hits. Distant Counter, and her abilities upon draining her HP bars were Vantage, Desperation, and Wrath. So the comparison between this and her Fae iteration is mostly that she is incredibly difficult to kill when she's transformed. Raging Storm in Fae is essentially the same as Aimer's combat art, but it's also Twin Crests in 3 houses. Weary and Special Fighter makes her more annoying to deal damage on as well. Everything else is, well, Faye just giving more abilities to power creep, I guess. But I'm actually kind of surprised they didn't just give her Vantage or Wrath. Not that I'm complaining or anything. Now, Forging Bonds. I will be drawing parallels to 3 houses, but honestly, her dialogue with Milla is so cool. Edelgard in the group conversations isn't uniquely characterized, and unsurprisingly, it's mostly her and Dimitri being at odds with one another, and both Morgans kind of serving their role to break them up. It's pretty funny actually. But her support conversations are very cool. In the C support, Kranya confronts her. Edelgard is upset to find her here, fighting alongside the very people who summoned her as well. Kranya then goads her by telling her they cannot kill one another, and even worse, gods of other worlds are present alongside them. Edelgard is not happy to see Kranya. Kranya murdered Gerald. And let's just say that in the Sealed Forest, Edelgard was out for blood. Kranya and Edelgard's reunion ends here, and in her place, Milla serves as Edelgard's foil through the B and S supports. To see Edelgard confront another god that isn't Rhea, and to actually engage in conversation is really cool to me. This iteration of Edelgard confronts Milla, and is quick to criticize her purpose in the mortal world. In the A support, they have a more complete conversation about the limitations that the gods place on humanity. Unsurprisingly, many sentiments from Edelgard directly reflect the source material, but things start to get interesting and a little off script once Milla begins to explain that within Asker, her powers are limited. Those heroes give all they have and still struggle to realize their desires. During such struggle, I believe it is my responsibility to grant them what miracles I can. And if a hero chooses not to struggle, what then? What of those who do not put forth any effort? I have yet to meet any called hero who do not struggle against the tide of their fate. Everyone here is possessed of a soul capable of giving themselves more than they ask. You are one such hero, are you not? Heroes take on what trials they face without assurance of miracles. They are driven by what lies in the core of their being. What I see there is what draws me to aid them. I love Milla's words here. Essentially, what she's saying is that despite being a god, and one of the most loving and giving gods out there, she recognizes the strength of mortals. She's finding common ground with Edelgard, who very clearly points out to Milla that the gods are a blight on human potential. Yet Milla explains to her that Asker is a world that demands mortals and gods coexist. When Edelgard asks her, well, what about the heroes in this world who just choose not to struggle? Milla essentially tells her that if that were the case, they wouldn't be here. Milla can't save or support these heroes like she could in Valentia. It is up to them and their own strength of spirit to persevere, but she can help them in other ways, like giving an extra turn on Light Season. Edelgard can't really contest this specific reality, but in the S support, she harkens back to gods in mortal worlds like in Fodlan. She once again vows to tear down societies that gods prevail over and to replace them with those strictly led by the strong. The mortal world should be left to mortals. We must be allowed to persist through our strength alone. Their lives should not be warped by the whims of any god. That kind of world is an aberration. Milla is moved by Edelgard's confidence and tells her stories of the Summoner's world, long past the need for divine intervention, with tall buildings and functioning societies. This is the potential of Edelgard's world, and even she's surprised by it. But to Milla's concern, Edelgard's ambitions begin to resemble the very reality she wages war over. I have no intention of allowing my people to leisurely grow their knowledge. The strong will reshape and lead the world. Worship of mortals blessed with power is no less doomed than worship of a god. Edelgard, your strength and resolve will surely bear you fruit in a world reborn by your hand. But I can't help but wonder what kind of world will grow from the ruin of what came before. This is a similar concern brought up by Dimitri as well.
And do you intend to become a goddess yourself? Will you steal the power to take action from the broken-hearted masses you claim to defend?
It's a possibility we won't see. Maybe this is the alternate timeline where Edelgard would rule with a heart of ice. I suppose the question is now, is this support a realistic, logical extension of how Hegemon Edelgard behaves in Three Houses? On one hand, Faye places characters into sit-down conversations even though they realistically would not, or even wouldn't be capable of doing. Like Fallen Ike. Is he really gonna sit down on a campfire with you? I'm just joking. But I do think this is a faithful representation of an Edelgard who has become more intense in her ideals, darker, and noticeably less compromising than in Verdant Wind or Silver Snow upon her transformation, but retaining her humanity regardless, as that is what happens in Azure Moon. And I can also especially appreciate that Milla was the chosen foil for her, challenging her cynicism from a more grounded understanding of how gods themselves can fail human progress and how they can also help them, as this Milla is from a timeline of which the events of her game already happened. Anyway, this is a great way to characterize Hegemon Edelgard and expand upon it as well. That will do it for my comparison analysis on Hegemon Edelgard from Fae and Hegemon Edelgard from Three Houses. This is a pilot video for the series, and honestly, I never really felt that Fae content did well for the channel or kind of belonged here. I'm still trying to figure out how I want to make Fae content, so if you did find this video enjoyable, I would really appreciate it if you left a like and a comment and commented down below your thoughts, or if you just wanted to leave feedback on Edelgard's representation in the game. And if you're new to the channel, please consider subscribing. Influxes of new subscriptions on new videos helps me see which direction I should take the channel in my future videos. And with that all being said, I hope you enjoyed, be civil, and I'll see you in the next one. Deuces.